All right, welcome into a special show, little Auburn Live Dogs HQ combination show with my man Palmer Thombs from HQ. What's up, Palmer?
Doing well, Justin. Doing well. Just excited to hit the road this weekend, and obviously, first time this season for Georgia that they'll be going on the road, and a great atmosphere on the plains. Jordan-Hare Stadium, always an exciting place to see these two teams square off. So, looking forward to seeing it, and looking forward to what's always an exciting matchup of the Deep South's oldest rivalry.
Yeah, it should be a good one. Hey, quick shout out if you don't mind to one of our sponsors who sponsors all of our shows. I just want to give them some quick love so they don't get mad at me, which is Session Cocktail. By the way, Georgia fans, if you come into town, go check out Session Cocktail in downtown Auburn. It's right there on Magnolia Avenue next to Taco Mama, heart of downtown. It's a great cocktail lounge and bar. It's not necessarily a traditional college bar. You pretty much have to sit. There's bar seating, there's booth seating, there's some couches, but it's not a place that you go in and there's standing people everywhere and all that. You go in, you get a seat, you have an awesome cocktail. There's TVs in there, so you can watch the games as well. But it's a really, really cool spot. So for Auburn fans and Georgia fans alike, if you're in there early on and you're hanging out 10, 11, 12, I don't know what time they open. It's the only thing I'm not sure about. They've mixed it up on Saturdays, but if they're go before the game or go grab a drink afterwards. Session Cocktail in downtown Auburn. Awesome place, and appreciate their support of what we do at auburnlive.com. All right, Palmer, let's get into this. Auburn Georgia game. Not a lot of success for Auburn over the last 20 years. I think I counted 5 wins, and they were pretty much in years that Auburn was, really damn good. 2004, 2005 was that classic in Athens, and then 10, 13, and 17 all SEC championship teams for Auburn. That's about well SEC West teams that won there and were in the SEC championship game for sure. So pretty much it's taken a championship level Auburn team to beat Georgia in the last 20 years. Everything else has not gone their way. The big storyline I think coming in is obviously Georgia being number one, and then on Auburn's side, it's the offensive disaster that was College Station. Yeah, Palmer, I don't know if you caught much of the Auburn-Texas A&M game, but offensively for Auburn, it was atrocious. 200 total yards, 3 offensive points. Nearly half of those yards came on the last 2 drives of the game when I think A&M had dialed the defense back a tad, and Auburn was just trying to do whatever they could. Peyton Thorne was really bad, 44 yards passing. And really against 2 Power 5 teams, Cal and Texas A&M, Auburn's offense has scored 17 points in 2 games. In those 2 games, 24 offensive drives in those 2 games, only two touchdowns. It's been bad. You take away UMass and Sanford, it's been really, really bad for Auburn on offense. A lot of issues at quarterback. Questions about play calling, although I think some of that's overblown. It's really just they got to figure some things out at quarterback. They had some untimely penalties against Texas A&M that cost them. But the quarterback issue is a problem. Peyton Thorne not keeping his eyes downfield, breakdown in pass protection a little bit, not finding open receivers that were there. And so Auburn goes into this game with very little confidence on offense. They're going to have to manufacture this confidence. They're going to have a really good first quarter and try to build back some confidence against obviously a talented Georgia defense. From your perspective, even if you haven't seen Auburn a ton, how is Georgia's defense playing? We know they're talented. We obviously know that. We know they're really good. Is there anything that Georgia's doing defensively that would give Auburn hope at all on offense?
Yeah, I think, and if I caught that correctly, Hugh said that Thorne is going to be the starter going into this one. Is that right?
Yeah, there shouldn't be any change. He was like, we're still waiting through that, but I don't foresee there being a change. He said last week before the A&M game, Peyton Thorne knows the offense the best. He understands where guys are supposed to be. And I don't like, so that's not in question. It would take a lot for Peyton Thorne to lose his job,
Right.
which a few more performances like College Station and you're going to be pushing it. But yeah, he gets what to do the most. He's the most experienced player. It didn't translate on Saturday for him.
To me, I think what'll be interesting, and I have gotten to catch a little bit of Auburn. Obviously, that Cal game being such a late kick, was catching a little bit of that game through the trying to fight off the sleepies. Texas A&M being an early kick with Georgia having a late kick last week, was able to watch a little bit of that one as well. And I, what interests me the most about, this matchup is the quarterbacks, and how does Auburn use both of those guys? Because I would imagine, just like we saw against Texas A&M, because Robbie Ashford brings something to the table, they're going to use both of them, in my opinion. And I think especially against a Georgia defense that can put pressure on you in so many different ways. And I know Thorne is more athletic than people give him credit for. But Ashford is very clearly the more athletic of the two. So, I'm interested to see how Georgia, prepares for both quarterbacks, and do they have different plans? Are they going to try to bring pressure to Thorne and force him to show the athleticism, or if Ashford's in the game, do they kind of sit back and, play it a little bit safer? Looking at how Georgia has played quarterbacks, and I think that they've played maybe the SEC's most talented quarterback so far this season in Spencer Rattler. The way that they approached that in the first half was they kind of let him, they probably brought 4-man pressures. And then in the second half, and Spencer responded really well to that. I think he was 16 of 18 at halftime. In the second half, they decided, hey, we can't just sit back and let this guy pick us apart. That was with an All-American safety and Javon Bullard that was out. David Daniel Sisavon was starting in his place. TBD on Bullard's status for this week, as he still makes his way back from an ankle sprain. Georgia was missing its sack leader in Michael Williams, last year's sack leader, this year's sack leader, coming off the edge at defensive end. And that is both those guys are All-American caliber players that have a big impact on this defense. And so, to me, I'm very interested to see how much pressure Georgia decides to bring, because they played their best football, defensively this season when they were bringing that pressure. But obviously doing so puts a lot of pressure on the secondary to play, almost perfect. And you can't have blown assignments and miscues on the back end if you're going to bring the house up front.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be. I think the challenge is how does Auburn? How do you build any confidence against the number one team in the country, and certainly one of the best defenses in the country? I'm not sure what they're going to have to do in that first quarter. They're going to have some success somehow, some way. A couple big plays, something, because they just come out of that A&M game pretty low, talking about needing to find some swagger back, needing to find some energy back on offense, and obviously being at home will help that.
Right.
But boy, I mean, it was just Auburn's run the ball fairly well, even against Cal and Texas A&M. They had success running the football. The problem at Cal was they had 4 turnovers. So every time they'd get going, they turned the ball over twice at midfield. And then Texas A&M, similar, had a couple of times where they broke inside the A&M 30 or 25-yard line, but a penalty brought it back and hurt their drives as well. And so you look at what Auburn did running the football against Texas A&M. Again, they did some good things, but if that's all you can do, and then you toss in some penalties, it really stalled their drives out, and it resulted in no points. Georgia's obviously going to be talented up front, so Auburn's going to have success there. They've been okay. Damari Alston's not going to play; he's out indefinitely. That's a bummer for Auburn. Brian Batty, the transfer from South Florida, small kid, pretty fast, had a good game against the Aggies, but it all comes down to Peyton Thorne and how is he going to fix some of the issues against Georgia? It's just not a good recipe. It's just not a good recipe for Auburn. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to fix it. You know, Auburn usually runs a lot of RPO stuff. Well, they want to anyway with Hugh Freeze, but they didn't against Texas A&M. Hugh Freeze said afterwards, "I don't really know why we didn't." You know, obviously the play calling is Philip Montgomery. So I'm not sure what Auburn's going to have to do, but it's going to happen early. If that game, I mean, if it gets into the second quarter, it's 14-0. I mean, this thing could get ugly. Auburn has to figure out a way in the first quarter to put a touchdown on the board. I think at least a field goal. They got to get points in the first quarter, which they haven't. They didn't get points in the first quarter against A&M, against Samford, or against Cal. 3 straight games they haven't scored at all in the first quarter.
Well, and along those lines, Georgia has been a little bit slower starting of a team, and I know we'll get to the Georgia offense and Auburn defensive battle here, but Georgia has been a slower starting team or slower scoring, as Kirby likes to say. They ended up scoring on their first drive this past week, and that was big, a big momentum boost there because they had struggled to do so. But so far this season, only 17 points in the first quarter. That's 4 first quarters, 17 points, little over, if my math is correct there, 4.25 points per game in that first quarter. And, little over a field goal, under a touchdown. If like you said, if Georgia is coming out and they're playing, and up 14-0 in this one at the end of one, you're right. It could get ugly. Especially when you look at the success Georgia has had on the flip side of starting a half. In the second half, they are outscoring opponents by a wide margin in the third quarter, haven't given up any third quarter points this season. So, I think that, obviously it would be huge for Auburn's offense to get a kickstart there. And, Hugh being somebody that has played against Kirby and had success against Kirby and that kind of a defense. I think that maybe he's a little bit more involved in that play calling this week. Maybe he's, ready to scheme some things up or has some tricks up his sleeve. And like you said, being in front of a home crowd, pulling out all stops to keep this one close, keep that crowd in the game. I don't think you'll have to get the crowd in the game. That's one thing that I think, works against Georgia is they're going to have to take the crowd out of it. Auburn has to keep the crowd in it early.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's going to be one of those things where I think the crowd's going to have a lot of energy. I think I'm curious to see what it's like in the first quarter because coming off that A&M game, that was so demoralizing. I mean, that was so rough if you watch that as an Auburn fan. But they're still 3-1. It's obviously Hugh Freeze's first season. I think that it'll be pretty electric from the jump. I don't necessarily think it'll be a deal where it's going to be a great crowd, but there's almost a little bit of a tempered enthusiasm when the game starts, like they're kind of just going, I hope we can keep it close. I think it'll be pretty rowdy early on. I do. I don't think it'll be a deal where people are sitting around thinking, "Oh, I hope we can stay in this thing," and then they get in as go. I think it'll be pretty electric from the beginning in terms of the fans and trying to keep them going. The good thing is Auburn's defense has played fairly well. If we talk about the other side of the ball, I think they're not great by any means on that side, but I think they've been a little bit better than I think people thought they would be. My expectation was the defense was going to be the weak point, and really it's the opposite right now. My expectation was that the front specifically didn't quite have the depth to hold up. And granted, we're only 4 games into the season and 1 conference game, so the defense could still have issues as we go. But so far, Auburn's defense has been pretty good, pretty sound. They forced, I guess, 8 turnovers now in 4 games. They've scored 2 touchdowns. They're getting crushed by injuries, Palmer. Like they have 2 starters that are out. Austin Keys at linebacker and Keontae Scott, who's maybe best football player, a fantastic player, an athlete. He was the number one punt returner too. He got hurt against Sanford and he's out. So you got two starters on the defensive side that are out. And then you just got a bunch of guys banged up. Donovan Kaufman, who's a really talented player at Nichols, banged up. Zion Puckett, their starting safety's banged up. Other guys have dealt with some injuries, whether it's Keldrick Falk or Larry Nixon at linebacker. Nehemiah Pritchett, their other starting quarterback, just came back. His first game back this season was the A&M game. So you just have had a lot of guys in and out on that defensive side of the ball. And a lot of those guys are going to play, I would imagine, against Georgia. They're just going to be not 100%, and they can't afford some of those positions. They cannot afford another injury. So they've been okay. Gave up some pass plays against A&M in that third quarter, some busted coverages. Been okay against the run. Gave up a couple of big long runs to A&M. I don't know how much of that was the line versus the linebackers misfitting. But we're pretty good against the run for the most part against A&M. They're just a group that the offense has got to help them. I mean, the defense can't sit there and go out on the field 3 and out when the offense is going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. It's not only from the snap count, but it's just demoralizing. And so I think that'll be big. Obviously, being at home, give the defense a little bit of energy. Georgia's offense, though, you can tell me, I mean, trying to find things with Carson Beck looked pretty efficient against the UAB. I didn't see every snap, but I mean, I thought if they could have scored, they could have tacked on another touchdown at the end if they keep starters in for sure, if not more. It's pretty much, to me, play action, run the ball, find Brock Bowers as much as possible. You've obviously got talented dudes at receiver. What's Carson Beck look like in that offense? Do you feel like they have their identity? Do they have the same type of explosive playmakers that they've had in the past? What does that thing look like compared to what it has the last 2 years with Stetson?
Yeah, find Brock Bowers is a great offensive plan for Georgia.
Yeah.
And that has kind of been, a safety valve of sorts for Carson. And I think that's not all too surprising when you consider he's a first-time starter and you look at, we could be looking at a battle of banged up units on this side when Georgia's got the ball, because Ladd McConkey has not played so far this season. Georgia's running back room has been banged up. Daijun Edwards missed the first 2 games. Kendall Milton has, been battling a hamstring injury during fall camp and wasn't full speed to start the season. He's now battling an MCL sprain, and what's his status for this week? Roderick Robinson. They lost Branson Robinson before the season, who was going to be one of their top 2 or 3 running backs, and now you've got, Roderick Robinson, a true freshman that they, got elevated up this depth chart a little bit because of the injuries elsewhere. He's now dealing with an ankle sprain. And so, you've got a running back issue for Georgia to the point that they have been playing Dylan Bell, a wide receiver at running back, a good bit, and he's been explosive. I think he adds a pass catching element out of the backfield. They've used Brock Bowers, lined him up in the backfield. Again, just any way that you can get 19 the ball is a good game plan.
Yeah.
But I think that with the injuries that they've got at receiver with Ladd McConkey, injuries that they've got at running back, now you've got an offensive tackle in Amarius Mims that's banged up. So, your protection, maybe, you got to play it a little bit safer there. They showed something a little bit different against UAB. They came out fast. They pushed the ball downfield. You saw Dominic Lovett getting open in space. Ra Thomas, another transfer, Lovett from Missouri, who, if I'm not mistaken, had a big game against Auburn last year. I could be wrong there, but Ra Thomas, coming over from Mississippi State, he's getting involved in this Georgia offense. And so, they are finding ways to push the ball downfield more in this past game than they did, and in the second half of South Carolina as well. So I would say in the last 3 halves of offensive football from Georgia, you've seen more of what I think the offensive identity of this team will be. I think that, they struggled early on. And I think part of that is they struggled to run the ball. With Dejan Edwards being out, his return has added an element where they've been able to, consistently push the ball, through loaded boxes that they've faced. As a result, in the first few games, they were having to use screens as an extension of the run game. And, they're still doing that. I mean, again, get the ball in 19's hands as quick as possible. And, sometimes that means just throwing it out to the sideline and letting him stiff arm his way to the end zone.
Yeah.
But, they are pushing the ball downfield more. Like you said, play action has become a bigger part of this offense with the emergence of a run game. And I think that that's big for Georgia finding their offensive identity. And I think that's big for Carson Beck because, again, we're talking about somebody who has 4 starts under his belt, is going to be making his first career road start on Saturday. It's super important to get him comfortable. They did that last week. They did that well, but we're talking UAB. And so, how do they get him comfortable early on against Auburn? Like you said, a defense that's been a bit surprising. Interested to see what they do. Kirby said that, sometimes going into a road atmosphere like this, you got to simplify things offensively. But I think that, in Georgia's case here, with the need to get Carson Beck going early to help this offense as a whole, maybe you don't simplify things. Maybe you've got, a good script that you feel really good, coming out of the gate with. And, that script is, has some downfield shots in it, like they did last week. They used tempo to their advantage. And so, very interested to see what that looks like. Like I said, there's a lot of banged up players on Georgia's offense. You're missing 2 All-Americans right now on defense, but the offense, I would say the guys that they're missing, they probably don't have the depth in terms of the talent. Defensively, they've recruited so well that they've got the talent to replace those guys with down the 2 deep. But offensively, I feel like they're struggling a little bit more to find the guys to step up and replace those key playmakers.
Yeah, this is a game where I think Auburn would love to have Keontae Scott at the nickel. Keontae's he's about 6'1.5", but he's an athletic player. He's a pretty good cover guy. I would imagine there would have been some opportunities there for him to try to stay on Brock Bowers from the nickel, maybe line him up there even and not rely on a linebacker to have to do it. Because Keontae's got some length, but without him, it's going to be tough. Kaufman, his replacement's a really good player. He's just small. Auburn will blitz a lot from that nickel position, whether it's Kaufman or bring a corner. But number 5, Donovan Kaufman, will be a very, very active player. I don't know. I guess Eugene Asante, number 9 at linebacker for Auburn, he'll probably have to try to stay with Bowers at times. But, trying to cover Brock Bowers is really hard. I am curious about, the Carson Beck aspect, just looking. That is something. Georgia started the year with 4 straight home games. And so your first road game is this environment, which early on will be legit. Curious. Georgia does such a good job of running the ball and play action and working their quarterbacks in. It's not like it's never an offense where it's on the quarterback. It doesn't feel like. So it's not like you're stepping in and Carson Beck's got to be a superstar. They do a good job. They can obviously lean on the running game and some things like that to make it easy on him. And their talent is just so good generally. But I am curious if Auburn's defense can come out, maybe be aggressive early on, just see how Carson Beck responds. I'm sure he'll probably be fine as it goes on, but it could be a challenge. First road game in this environment, it could be something to watch early on if Auburn can dial up some pressure, do something to maybe rattle him or make him uncomfortable early, kind of buy some time, if you will. Carson Beck will probably be fine, and Georgia's offense will settle in. But can Auburn's defense do something early on to buy him a few possessions? Whether it's get a 3 and out or 2, or just rattle them, confuse them for a minute to where it maybe takes a drive or two for Georgia to sort of get back on track. Anything that I think to buy them time and to shorten the game, if you will, could be huge. And obviously Auburn's offense doing something, anything would be a great contributing factor to that. So what's the spread in this game? 17.5. I think I saw the other day. I guess is it still about that?
I thought it was down to 14 and
down
14
to
or so. Yeah, 14.5 is kind of what I thought I had seen on Sunday.
What's interesting is so it came out at 17.5. I'm like, that sounds about right. I told our board on Monday, I was like, I don't really have a good reason why, but I was like, I feel like Auburn is going to come out and set at 17.5. I thought they were going to cover. I'm like, well, I don't know, man. I think Auburn, they're not going to look offensively. They're not going to look as bad as they did in College Station, even against a better defense. I think being at home will help them. Peyton Thorne's played well at home. For some reason, he hasn't played well on the road. Like, it's like a different thing, but he's looked pretty good at home. And so I think he will look like a different player and have a little bit more confidence at home. And I think Auburn can hang around. It's just, what can Auburn do offensively? Like, best case scenario, what are they going to put up points wise? I mean, given what we've seen in 2 Power 5 games for Auburn, it is hard for me to think they go out there and score more than 17. Like, that's stretching it. I mean, given what we've seen. Now, if the defense forces turnovers and things like that, that's a different factor, right? If they get short field, if they get a punt return, things like that can affect it. But if we're assuming Georgia doesn't have any turnovers or maybe turns the ball over once, and Auburn's offense has to do most of the work, unless they come out with just a fire game plan and Peyton Thorne finds confidence that he didn't have last week and starts slinging the ball and receivers make some plays that you haven't necessarily seen them make. I mean, some things have to happen in this game that I haven't seen is my point. And so I don't – it's hard for me to imagine Auburn topping 17 points in this game if they can even get there. And if that's the case, as good as Auburn's defense has played, which I think they've been pretty solid, I mean, Georgia's too talented for me to probably I think Auburn's defense would look at this and say we played well if we hold them to 21.
Yeah, that's kind of what I had thought, 21. Yeah. But here's the thing, Justin, is that the next time Georgia covers a spread will be the first time they cover a spread this season. And obviously there's been some big numbers against the competition.
I had UAB plus 42.5, by the way. I was like, yeah, I don't know, man. UAB, that's a big number. Well, Kirby, what they do is they get up, but then Kirby's not afraid to play young players and sit it down and not sit there and win by 50.
And the fact that they haven't started that quickly. I mean, true. In our staff predictions, I did not have them covering the spread last week, and they did not. So, I think that this number is a lot more reasonable. In terms of, look, Georgia going out and expecting them to, just because of the G that's on the side of the helmet, to, beat these inferior opponents by 50, by 45. Just expecting that without really diving into, well, they've got a first-time starter at quarterback. They've got, this running back out, that running back out, this wide receiver out, that All-American out. That it was a tall task. It was a tough ask of them. Like I said, I think that this number is a lot more reasonable, and I think that you're probably right. Just looking at Auburn and that offense, it's, you're asking them to play about as perfectly as possible. And, Georgia, the average probably went up this past week, giving up 21 to UAB, but, there was a short field involved in that. They fumbled a punt return, late in that first half, and, gave UAB a short field. I think they ended up scoring from, had to punch it in from 30 yards out or something. So, as long as Georgia doesn't make mistakes, And I think that's, again, talking about this road atmosphere, the unknown of how this team is going to respond to a hostile environment where they don't have 93,000 on their side. That's where you could see them maybe making a mistake or two. But like you said, I mean, I think that it's a tall task to ask, this Georgia team, this Georgia offense and defense and special teams that's so talented to make 3, 4, 5 mistakes on top of, probably playing on top of Auburn offensively playing the best that they have all season. So I probably would have them covering 14 and a half, 17 and a half. I don't know. I mean, like you said, that's where that line opened at a couple weeks ago. And I think it's moved down, so certainly interested to see, how they respond. And I think like we said earlier in this show is, I think the first quarter we will have a good feel on the way that this game is going to go. If Auburn is keeping this close in the first quarter, maybe the Tigers cover. Maybe the Tigers keep it closer than everybody expects. But if Georgia jumps on them early, I think that we could be looking at Georgia's first cover of the season.
Yeah, that'd be worst case scenario. Georgia jumps out 10-0, 14-0 after one. That would be worst case scenario because you would just have an Auburn offense that would already be dealing with a lot, and now they have to try to come back against that. It's gonna be tough, and then need to be dealing with an Auburn defense that's sitting there going, great, we're already giving up 10 or 14 points. We got an offense that's not moving the ball. How do we rally the troops? That would be worst case scenario. Auburn needs to get out of that first quarter. And then that third quarter will be big too. I mean, Auburn was 6-3 in College Station at halftime. And that third quarter, defensively, for whatever reason, they had a couple of busted coverages in that third quarter and allowed 2 touchdowns, and then it was 20-3. Auburn's defense played pretty well, but they just had a couple of bad drives in that third quarter, combined with a couple 3-and-outs on offense, and it went bad really quickly. So you can't have that as well. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think 14's coverable. 17 seemed like a big number. First quarter will be big. I do think we'll be third quarter in this Auburn Georgia game still going, okay, can Auburn make a play here? I still think there will be an opportunity there as the third quarter gets going, maybe midway through, where Auburn will have a shot.
I'd be very curious to know what Vegas thinks about that first quarter line.
Yeah.
And I don't know how easily we could find that, especially, early on in the week. But, that to me, I think if you wanted to kind of parlay those two, Auburn covers the first quarter, covers the game, that's the recipe. And then vice versa, Georgia covers. I'd have a hard time seeing Georgia covering that first quarter, Auburn covering the game, or Auburn covering first quarter and Georgia covering the game.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think that's a fair point. You mentioned Ladd McConkey. Any other starters, any other big guys that you think won't play on Saturday for Georgia? Auburn, outside of the 2 guys that have already missed games now, I'm not sure that there's going to be anything from the A&M game that comes over, just nicks and bruises and banged up. But I don't know that there's anything other than Damari Alston, obviously, he's kind of starter quality. So really it's 3 starters out. But anybody from Georgia that's like, hey, this guy might not play, and if he didn't, that'd be a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's TBD on Ladd because, Kirby told us on Monday that he's back at practice this week and that they're hoping, it has truly been a week-to-week thing. He's dealing with a back injury, and it has been, he'll practice for the week, and then all of a sudden Friday or Saturday he wakes up and it's hurting him. Who among us doesn't feel that?
What's his injury?
I think it's back spasms, but it's back related for sure. So, it's been a situation where truly day-to-day, week-to-week thing. And Kirby said that they took an advised shut him down for 2 weeks. And so he was unavailable completely in the prep for South Carolina and UAB. But they're hoping to get him back at practice this week and see how he responds. And so, to me, I think we'll have a good idea of if Lad McConkey makes this trip to Auburn, with the 70-man travel roster for Georgia, I'd be surprised if he's not playing. But just because, you don't use one of those values, so valuable spots, if a guy's just, completely unavailable to play. So that's the main one. Javon Bullard would be the other one, dealing with an ankle sprain. He warmed up for the South Carolina game. He was dressed out, warmed up. Truly was a game time decision, but Kirby said that he didn't feel great. And so they ended up sitting him. He did not dress this past week for UAB. Don't think he practiced as much for that week, but I also think that was probably by design, knowing that we can get by without Javon Bullard and let's get him ready for Auburn. So to me, I think Javon Bullard is back. He would still be questionable, but I lean more yes for him. McConkey, definitely questionable, maybe even doubtful. I probably lean no with him until I see him out on a field. Michael Williams, I would imagine that they're going to get him back. Kirby said he was dealing with a little bit of a sickness. And so, they had a guy, ill for South Carolina that was back and back in the lineup against UAB. I would imagine the same thing is going to be the case here. Amarius Mims, starting right tackle, he's out. But that's a, extended thing. He's not even questionable for this, dealing with a, sprained ankle, had the tightrope surgery. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins is on that too deep and probably would be considered a starter by Kirby. He's a defensive end there with Williams. And look, if you're missing both those guys, that is a questionable, too deep there. They've probably got a freshman and Gabe Harris on that too deep that was recruited as an outside linebacker and moved to defensive end. So those are the big ones. Would watch Kendall Milton as well. Although, what he's dealing with, the timetable for his return, very much up in the air. So Georgia's a banged up football team. Kirby said it ahead of last week that this was the longest list of injuries he has ever had to deal with at Georgia. And Ron Corson and the athletic trainer said that as well. But, I do think that this team is getting healthier. We saw, more guys dress out against UAB. And I would imagine, that some of the guys that didn't dress out was probably precautionary.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it sounds like both teams are dealing with certainly a lot of nicks and bruises and beat up as
that's
SEC
the SEC.
play
That's
getting
life.
started. Yeah.
So is
For
college
Auburn,
football in September.
No doubt. And for Auburn, they got to get through this week. They get a bye after Georgia, and then things get easier. They go to Baton Rouge and then host Ole Miss. So it's fine. Auburn's in a great spot. Nothing hard coming at all. But they got to get healthy. They need to get through this game for Auburn and without any further injuries, and then go into the bye week and try to rest up. But that's Georgia.
Whereas for Georgia, this is the start of the slate. I mean, they've got 7. There's a bye in there somewhere, but before Florida, but they've got 7 straight SEC games. They've got a Kentucky team that's always physical, undefeated right now, has a big one this weekend against Florida. Kentucky's coming to town next weekend. Florida, and then after that bye, you're looking at 4 straight games against teams that are currently ranked in Florida, Missouri, Ole Miss, Tennessee. That is the defining stretch of this season. But I don't think that you can sleep on that first road game of the season against Auburn this weekend, and then a team that always plays them tough in Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky's off to a pretty good start. We'll see, man. Should be a good one. Look, 2 years ago, that Auburn Georgia game was competitive for a while. That was Harson's first year. Bo Nix was there 21. Yeah.
Hell, it was close to at halftime last year.
Kind of, yeah. And then the Lad McConkey play 2 years ago kind of broke things open. I think it was 17-3, and then he scored. It was 24-3. It was kind of over. Yeah, last year was an interesting game. Georgia pulled away there. Auburn, had Robbie Ashford at quarterback and just didn't have. At that time, they were still running the old offense with Robbie Ashford, and it was kind of a disaster. So it'll be a fun first half for sure. Fun atmosphere. Probably the best Auburn Georgia atmosphere in there since 19. I mean, 21. Harson's first year was okay, but there's a little bit more juice behind what Hugh Freeze is doing, and so it should be fun. Georgia's first road game. I think that's going to be Auburn's best chance. Try to hope that Georgia comes in first road game of the year, and you can do something to rattle them. And it might be Ron Roberts trying to be really aggressive. Maybe Auburn says, "Look, we're going to just attack," and it might put us on an island a couple of times, but we can't sit back and just try to defend this. Maybe they try to be really aggressive and take chances and try to get them behind the chains a couple of times. And you know what I mean? I mean, you got to do something. I think sitting back and trying to be and just defend what Georgia does, it's going to be tough. They're going to try to be aggressive, try to force a turnover too, and that could go against you. You could give up some big plays. You absolutely could, but I'm not sure Auburn can win if they're not a little bit overly aggressive, maybe in blitzing and trying to get to them and create some situations. It's risky, yeah, but I think Auburn's going to have to try to do that, especially early. Use the home crowd to your advantage and try to create some real energy. Go out there on that first drive, get a sack or something, or whatever it might be, and really try to set the tone for the game. But yeah, I think you're right. The first quarter is going to be massive for both teams for a lot of reasons. Should be a good one. 2:30 CBS, Auburn and Georgia. Georgia's owned this rivalry lately for a while now, and so we'll see what Hugh Freeze can do in his first attempt in the rivalry. Hugh Freeze saying he's about love, Palmer. He's not about hate, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with what he said. My gosh, what a terrible thing to say. The guy's like, I don't really believe in hate. What an awful thing to say. But for the fans, this has become, and I don't know how it's for Georgia fans, it's a hatred rivalry for the fans. And so they want him to come out and go, they want Hugh Freeze to come out and go, hey, this is one of our rivals. We want to beat him every year. We want to beat him in recruiting and we want to beat him on the field. That's the deal. And Kirby and Georgia want to do the same thing. And but that's what they wanted to hear. And Freeze kind of was like, to Freeze's credit, he said, look, I'm new here. I don't know. He was literally like,
he hasn't experienced it before.
I'm not saying. He's like, I don't. But you got to remember, he comes from Ole Miss, Mississippi State, which that's a different level of hatred.
But I think
pretty ugly too.
I think that if I remember he commented on it at some point, whether it was during the off season or at media days or whatever. He understands the importance of the Iron Bowl for sure. Understanding that is one of the defining games, and I think that the more time that you spend in this rivalry, Georgia Auburn, the better understanding that you have of where it stands for both of these schools. It's probably not that number one rival. I mean, Georgia's got Florida. Auburn has Alabama. Those are games that define your season a lot of times and can be what gets you into an SEC championship setting or keeps you out of it. But this Georgia Auburn one, it's because of the history to it and how many times they've played and how close they are and yada, yada, yada. And how much overlap there is between the fan bases. There is absolutely a rivalry here. I think that as Georgia Tech has gone downhill, the hatred there probably isn't what it used to be. The hatred between Georgia and Auburn, certainly is there.
Yeah. So I think I'm sure Hugh Freeze caught some of the reaction to what he said. And he's probably like, okay, geez. All right. I mean, he basically was just saying, look, I think we should play these rivalry games because we love Auburn. and I want to win this because I want Auburn fans. I'm not going to play the game because I hate them so much. And as a player and the way they approach it, sure. Fans, no. Fans hate the other side, and so it was just kind of funny, the reaction, which was whatever. It'll be done in a few days, and he'll play the game. And if you think Hugh Freeze, look, I get what Hugh Freeze said in public about that, but Hugh Freeze is a savage behind the scenes. If you don't think behind the scenes, he's telling his team, and a lot different than let's go out there and play for love of Auburn. You know what I mean? You don't think he's telling them to, and you don't think that he's trying to do that in recruiting. Trying to win these recruiting battles and stick it to Georgia, try to flip the card a little bit. It was just kind of a funny comment and a lot of wild reaction. All right. We'll call it a day. Make sure you're at Dawgs HQ. Go check out, if you're an Auburn fan, go check them out if you want to read a little bit about Georgia and see what's going on with them the week leading up. Obviously, you can do the same at auburnlive.com. Catch up on what Hugh Freeze is saying and players are saying, and all that good stuff as Auburn and Georgia prepare for another battle inside Jordan-Hare Stadium. Will be a sold out 88,000 plus people. So it should be an awesome atmosphere. 2:30 CBS. Weather looks good. Probably lower to mid 80s. So it should be a really awesome day in Auburn as Georgia and Auburn go at it. All right, Palmer. Appreciate it, man.
Yep. Thanks, Justin.
All right, let's get out of here. See you guys.